Welcome everybody to our the third in our line. Oh, sorry, I'm just admitting someone. To the third in our online series of national conversations, part of our a conference program for our 2021 conference in partnership with the National Gallery. I'm Rachel Payne. I am the immediate past president of NSEAD, and I'm also a principal lecturer in student experience at Oxford Brookes. If you could just make sure that you mute while we have our speakers, there will be an opportunity for everybody to contribute via the chat in due course. Over the next 2 hours, we'll be hearing from children, teachers, gallery educators and change makers. And of course, our silent guest, the artwork gifted to the session by the National Gallery, which is Toulouse Lautrec's The Two Friends. This painting is currently on long-term loan from Tate to the National Gallery. For those who wish to stay for small group discussions, we'll move into breakout rooms to carry on the conversation through until 6 o'clock. If you have any questions for our speakers, please do put them in the chat and we'll pick up as many of them as we can. Our conference theme today is equity. This afternoon, we're going to be looking at what this means through the lens of values. In particular, how we as art educators can work together to ensure that learning experiences reflect the things that are important to our learners. We're delighted to be joined this afternoon by Karen Esley, Head of Learning and National Programmes at the National Gallery, by Wendy James, the force behind My Primary School is at the Museum, by Laura Emanuel, class teacher from St Thomas Community Primary School in Swansea, and to open the conversation, the young arts leaders from PalmBay Primary and their teacher, Mel Tong. Some of you may recognise Mel as one of our Oak Academy primary curriculum team. Mel is one of the 7 primary art, craft and design specialists who created the excellent set of video lessons for Key Stage 1 and 2, and will be hosting one of our breakout rooms later on. Holly, William, Theo and Amelia are young arts leaders from PalmBay Primary School. They're all in Year 6. They joined the Young Arts Leaders process much earlier on in their schooling and have taken part in a variety of projects, including Arts Inspiring Change and My Classroom is a Gallery with the Turner Contemporary. They see their role as art leaders as sharing ways to see and look at art, helping others to discuss art and artists, and to share ideas about what others can make or do, as well as being challenging in your own artwork. So joining us from a pre-recorded Zoom are pupils from PalmBay Primary who are going to give us the expert view on our guest artwork, chosen for us by them from a shortlist put together by the National Gallery Learning Team. Now over to Sophie. Yeah. Sophie, we can't hear it. You're on mute.
Everyone, lovely to see you again. Thanks ever so much for making time for us. Very excited to find out which artwork from the National Gallery collection you have selected to be the guest artwork for this third conference session. So can't wait to hear which one it is. You had a short list from the National Gallery. And also to hear about why you think it speaks to you about your values. So can't wait for that, but do you want to introduce yourselves to our conference audience?
Hello, I'm Amelia.
I'm Holly.
I'm William.
I'm Theo.
And mine's Melanie Tong. I'm the arts lead here at PalmBay Primary School. I've worked with these children as young arts leaders since they were in Year 2. They're now in Year 6. So they've almost finished their school journey. And while the duration of their time as young arts leaders, they have taken part in different projects with the Turner Contemporary Gallery, lots of those projects, but also within school. So leading workshops for other children in school, directing younger children to take part in activities and all sorts of other things. But a lot of talking about art and thinking about art. Okay, Could you tell the conference about what 3 paintings made your shortlist and why?
So the first one we had on our shortlist was this one, which I think is called Morning, and we chose it because we kind of thought that we couldn't really live without nature, and we thought it had a real sense of hope.
And then William?
Then we thought about this one, which I cannot remember, but
Oh, the
Samaritan.
it's a Good Samaritan. Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
The reason why we liked it is because it showed us people as friends or community or and this one kind of was similar to this other one called Two Friends. They showed a connection by like friendship, caring for other people, and the value that friends can have upon your journeys.
In the end, we chose this one because it showed a lot of friendship and care, and the way that the woman looks like she's caring for the man or woman with the blanket. It resembles community, love, and friendship, especially with this past year of where you couldn't see loved ones and friends. With like this sense was very.
Well, why did you choose that value as being the most important? What value are we actually taking mostly from this image? Are we talking about community, love, care, or friendship, do you think?
Love.
Love?
Yeah.
Okay. So why was love the most important value for you this year, Amelia?
It was very because of the pandemic, where you couldn't see your loved ones and where it was very hard, and especially with you had to stay by yourself, and it was relatable on different levels. You could have care for your friends and grandparents and children, but then the more important thing is ed, and also to care for others.
Oh, that's lovely. So it works in both directions. You did notice something about some similarities between the 2 paintings. Holly, would you like to?
Can we notice the positioning of the carer and the caree? Because they both are the carer is sort of like wrapping their arms around them, like help them, to help them sort of like. In this one, it looks like he's helping him stand up, and then the other one, it looks like they're caring for like sickness.
Okay, great. So your final chosen painting, The Two Friends by Toulouse Lautrec. Tell us about why that appealed to you. What other reasons were there why that image particularly appealed to you as your final image to represent love, care, and friendship?
It shows how people can care for other people when it you can feel the warmth in the paintings, how maybe they might be really, really good friends, or one of them's just lost somebody they love. And it kind of shows that in the colours of the painting, like the bright pinks and the reds and all the other colours, all the bright colours, that shows warmth. And yes,
I agree. What about the posture of the people in the painting? You told me about that, and that's why we selected it. We've made reference to the fact that it's similar to the Good Samaritan painting. Tell me more about that.
it's more similar in the way that people can care for each other, and then, as you said, they are in the same body, same body language. How they're, I don't know how to say this, but
They're sort of wrapping them. because on the two friends, they're one of them is wrapped around with a blanket, and on the other one, it looks like he's wrapping him around with his arms to help him up.
Yeah, I think so. Holly, can you tell us about the mark making in the paintings, or the painting that you chose in particular?
The painting that we chose, it looked it kind of looked rushed, but still very detailed, like with the hand wrapped around the person being cared for.
What sort of marks are they?
They're like quite squiggly lines.
Are they bold, brash marks, or?
No, they're sort of like warming colours and quite faint marks.
Okay.
You can show love not just in words, you can also show it in body language, as we all said. And continue with Holly's point, where it's a bit sketched, and it makes it just feel a bit more realistic. If you just take the people out, you can still feel the love that it senses.
And you didn't realise at first, but they are potentially two women in the picture. So what sort of relationship, did that make you think? Did that make you think differently about it, or is love still your first response? You know, that's still the value that painting represents for you?
Yeah.
You tell me more about that.
Because you can love who you want, and it doesn't matter as long as you're happy, and it's this way that you care for someone. Remember at the end of the day that you are loved. Someone else.
Yeah.
And also, once you get older, you want to have friends, because it would be quite a lonely life without them. Friends are quite a big thing in your life. It's quite easy to make friends when you're younger, when you're a child, but when you're adult, and it's not as easy as it was.
No, I think that's a really important point. I think when you're at school, particularly primary school as well, there's a lot of emphasis on caring for each other, being friendly. We have a lot of lessons about that, don't we? And it's very much part of your everyday lives. You're reminded almost how to be friendly, how to show care. We don't necessarily call it love, but it is a form of love, isn't it? Friendship. And I think you've hit on a really interesting point there, William, that adults need to be reminded perhaps sometimes of that you know, those sort of values need to be kept. Can you say anything more about that? The importance of...
Yeah, it's important to have friends, for if you're unwell or you're sad or anything, friends can be there to help you or to care for you. But if you wouldn't have any friends, that would be just quite a hard life and quite a sad life.
I'm thinking about the kind of the reference that Amelia made at the beginning, like, for example, the NHS at the moment, and when people being sick and being cared for. Is that love? Is that friendship? Is that care? Is it faith? Is it all of those things? Some of those things? What do you think?
It would be like care, because most of the time, most doctors or nurses don't know who they're working with, but all they know is to help them, keep them alive. Or
So without that value, would they be able to do that job?
No, so it is really valuable and special to us because of where people have a caring family, and also you sometimes rely on it too much. But then as you think about it more, you feel more grateful, especially with that posture with the NHS. They're amazing.
Does the painting give us a message then for the adults at the conference?
Yes, they do. It says,
It's okay. Then Holly, do you think, what message would you share, sort of?
That you need to be thankful for the things that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Which include
which include like friendship and community.
Yeah.
Take a day at its time and live life as you want.
Yeah.
Don't forget what you already have.
I would say all of those things are pretty important to tell the adults and share with the adults at the conference.
Thank you so much for gifting us this wonderful work, because we're all going to go away and have a good think about the things you said and what it means to us as well. So it's just a brilliant way to start the conversation for this third session. And we're really grateful to you for giving it such care and thought yourselves. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wow, that was absolutely wonderful. Thanks so much to Mel and the PalmBay Young Arts leaders. They've got so much good sense there for and advice for us. I thought that their final message about being thankful for friendship and community and how that is underpinned by their most important value of love was just wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how Karen is going to now respond to this. So Karen Esley is our second presenter today. She's joined the National Gallery as Head of Learning and National Programmes in 2019, where she's created a new strategy for learning. She has over 28 years experience of working in gallery education and was previously Head of Learning and Visitor Experience at Turner Contemporary in Margate. At Turner Contemporary, she worked closely with the director to develop the gallery's vision, audience and new building, designed by David Chipperfield Architects, which opened in 2011. She developed strategies for both informal and formal learning and worked with practical philosopher Aisha de Lanarol to pioneer the use of hands-on philosophy in the gallery. She champions children's leadership through the arts, enabling children as young as 4 to lead creative change in their own communities. The values and voices of young artists is an issue very close to Karen's heart, and we're really delighted to invite her to respond to the children from PalmBay Primary and their choice of The Two Friends as their guest artwork for today. I'd just like to hand over to Karen.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Hello, everyone. It's so lovely to be here. I'm just going to share my screen before I start. I hope you can all see that. Yeah, and a big highlight of my career at Turner Contemporary was working with the young arts leaders, and genuinely they keep inspiring me in my new role. So thank you very much to them. So thank you so much to NSEAD for inviting me to participate today. And thanks again to the young arts leaders from PalmBay and Mel for introducing us to one of the paintings in the National Gallery, which has been very kindly loaned to us from Tate, as Rachel says. So the young arts leaders generously offer us, as adults, a thought-provoking example against which we can consider our own understanding of childhood and of teaching and learning. When children show us how to carefully look at a painting and to help us see it from a new perspective without judgment, isn't there a strong case to be made for working in partnership with children? Empowered and inspired by the children we work with, we've developed a new 5-year learning strategy at the National Gallery. We're at the very beginnings of this journey, but over the next 5 years and beyond, we'll explore how we can genuinely work in equal partnership with children and young people across the UK, so that they can lead positive change through art for themselves and for others. So the young arts leaders today have shown us that by looking really carefully and thinking about paintings, in this case about The Two Friends by Toulouse Lautrec, we can find out more about ourselves and our beliefs and our humanity and our own values. And I was lucky enough to watch the film before today, and so many things struck me, but one of the quotes I absolutely love, I'm just going to read the words of the young art leaders again. In The Two Friends, we see care in the body language, where she's gently resting her hand round the other, making her feel safe and keeping her warm. The colours are warm, they make you feel good. how they're emotional. The pinks and reds are warm and calm and make you think of love. The texture on the blanket folds into him or into her or him, wraps around, represents now because she or he looks sick and the other person is caring. We see lots more images like that now. We can relate to that. So although we've all been children, experiences of childhood and perceptions of this period of our lives are ever-changing and complex. Cultural constructions of childhood and understanding of the inner life of children are constantly in flux. The National Gallery collection spans the 13th century to the 20th century, and therefore charts representations of childhood in Western Europe during this period. Of course, I want to acknowledge that there are also many representations of children and people in general that are excluded from the collection. For example, children of colour or disabled children. And we're at the beginning of a journey of working with partners to consider carefully how to talk about these absences sensitively and to explore why it is that the collection presents the world as it does. As art and design curator and queer feminist activist Claire Mead asked us when she was helping to explore gender in the collection, how do we use interpretation and our imaginations to fill in these gaps? So in times predating modern medicine and public health improvements, many infants sadly died before their first birthday. Before the 17th century, children were seen as mini adults, which can perhaps be seen here in Lorenzo Lotto's portrait of Giovanni della Volta with his wife and children, which was completed in 1547. In 1960, one of the first historians of childhood, Philippe Ariès, stated that in medieval Europe, the idea of childhood did not exist. Most people were not even sure of their own age. Babies were seen as burdened with original sin from which they had to be redeemed through their education. So that changed in the 17th century when children instead began to be seen as innocents who must be protected from harm and corruption by the adult world. This painting of the Bulby children by Anthony van Dyck, painted about 1625-7, was really groundbreaking because it represented children as expressive individuals with a real sense of mischief and character about them. There's a close-up of them here. You can see the contrast to the painting before in their faces, and I can sense their spirited desire to run away from the painter, to escape and do something more interesting. From around this time, childhood came to be understood as a distinct stage of life. John Locke, an English thinker who lived between 1632 and 1704, saw the mind of a newborn child as a blank page to be filled by its elders. Later, in 1762, in Emile or On Education, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a Swiss philosopher, argued that, and I quote, "Childhood has its own way of seeing, thinking and feeling, and nothing is more foolish than to try to substitute ours for theirs." So perhaps this can be seen in Chardin's paintings. As Dorothy Johnson points out in Picturing Pedagogy, Education and the Child in the paintings of Chardin, it is, and I quote, useful to be reminded by the young schoolmistress of a pedagogy based in respect for the unknowability of others. And to quote Eva Leger-Burkhardt in The Ethics of Pedagogy in Painting, learning to read, according to Chardin, is not a matter of routine memorization, but of absorbing knowledge by interiorizing it, making it one's own. It's not just the alphabet, but language is a subjective and social functioning that the painting's younger protagonist is in the process of acquiring. And thank you very much to my colleague Mark Woodhead for making me aware of the work of the last two writers. So the theme of a child building a house of cards was really familiar to Chardin's contemporaries from 17th and 18th century images, which were often accompanied by moralizing verses. So when an engraving of this painting was made by Francois Bernard Lepissier in 1743, The caption under the image included the lines, "Dear child on all pleasures bent, we hold your fragile work in jest, but think on it, which will be more sound, our adult plans or castles built by you?" In the late 18th and early 19th century, the Romantics credited children with deeper wisdom than adults, and listening to the young arts leaders today, it's hard to disagree. So when I was thinking about this talk, I came across some tantalising information about a family that actually lived in the West Wing of the National Gallery. In December 1854, Ralph Nicholson Wernham became the keeper of the National Gallery and secretary to the Board of Trustees. He served in his post for 22 years until his death in 1877. He had 14 children, and they lived in an apartment inside the Trafalgar Square site, a plan of which you can see here. And it's actually in an area where the exhibitions team and the director and Susan, who spoke last week, her office is in this area too. So much of Wernham's writing was about paintings in the collection, but there are a few insights into his life at the gallery. For example, there's a letter from someone called Sir Frederick Burton to Ralph Wernham, written on the 4th of August, 1875, asking Wernham to caution your son against smoking within the walls of this building. Burton does not have positive proof, but suspects it after smelling fresh tobacco smoke near the boardroom. And here's an image of the family tree and a photograph of John Ruskin Wernham, one of Ralph's sons, with a lock of his hair, which is in the archive of the National Gallery. When I'm able to go back on site, I very much look forward to reading. Oh, sorry, I've missed a little bit there. There's also in the archive a diary by Helen, one of his daughters, which apparently is about her life in London. So I really look forward to reading this. Will it shed any light on children's experiences of growing up in the company of the paintings? Would reflecting on the works in the collection over such a long period of time have influenced the children's lives and values? If we were able to look closely at the same picture from early childhood through adolescence to the start of our own adulthood, would we feel the painting change as our experiences and view of the world develop, and indeed as our brains develop and change and make new neural connections? This could be the start of an interesting research project, which I very much look forward to embarking on. And these questions that I started thinking of reminded me of a book that was very influential on me by art writer T.J. Clarke. And if you don't know it, I really recommend it. It's called The Sight of Death. So he asks, why do we find ourselves returning to certain pictures time and again? What is it that we're looking for? How does our understanding of an image change over time? So the book really explores, it's in early 2000, 2 paintings by Poussin hung in the Getty Museum in Los Angeles in a single room. Landscape with a man killed by a snake, that's actually part of the National Gallery in London's collection, and the Getty's own Landscape with a Calm. So Clarke found himself returning to the gallery to look at these paintings morning after morning, and almost involuntarily, he began to record his shifting responses in a notebook. Clarke's meditations, sometimes directly personal, sometimes speaking to the wider politics of our present world, track the experience of viewing art through all its real-life twists and turns. How fascinating for a child, perhaps, to have charted this same experience, and over a far greater period of time. Will Helen's diary include any similar musings? Did the paintings have any impact on her values? Did the children's views on the paintings influence their father in any way? How would the young arts leaders' responses to the 2 friends change over time if they talked about it every day, perhaps for 20 years? And then moving into the 20th century, in this painting of 1926-7 by Edward Vuillard of Madame André Wurmser and her children, we see a much more sophisticated, relaxed representation of family life, with children immersed in culture and with their own interests and autonomy. By this point too, though, the media had begun to influence adults' perceptions and fear of youth, as I explored in a catalogue essay which I wrote for the exhibition Nothing in the World But Youth at Turner Contemporary in Margate in 2011. The exhibition explored representations of adolescence from the 19th century to the present day. Of course, this is a whole subject in itself, but it's worth noting that the media have been influencing our understanding of youth since around 1890, when newspaper articles started making connections between delinquency and dress. Not all young people at the time were represented as positively as the young people in the painting. And of course, we mustn't forget that a decade before this was painted, the violence of the First World War brought huge responsibility for young people and also destroyed the automatic obedience that elders expected. Philip Gibbs' novel, Young Anarchy, written in the same year as we created this painting, is haunted by memories of the Great War. And I quote, "It was the war itself which was the cause of all this. It brought down more than the crowns and the kingdoms. It killed more than the millions of dead. It smashed something in the minds of men, age-old traditions of thought, the foundations of faith, many hopes and illusions in the soul of humanity, the ancient discipline of social life. Its heritage of misery and ruin left a cynicism which has been bequeathed to the very children of the years that followed." So after that very, and apologise, very whistle-stop tour and view of childhood through the National Gallery collection, where are we now? I'm sure that most of us here today, if not all, have a really positive and rich view of children and young people, their creativity and values, and would support their empowerment and their agency. However, the Kids' Rights Index presents a troubling view of the UK's relationship with its young people. So every country that signed up to the Convention for Children's Rights has to supply data which is compiled into the Kids' Rights Index, and you can see their website on this slide. If you don't know about it, I'd urge you to search Kids' Rights Index. Currently, the UK is 169th out of 182 countries, in part because children have little power to participate in society or to affect decisions that have an impact on them. This is at odds with research that shows they are the most advanced divergent thinkers in society, cited by the late educationalist and passionate arts education advocate Sir Ken Robinson in his talk, Changing Education Paradigms. So personally, I believe that children and young people are thoughtful innovators, creative thinkers, are altruistic, open-minded and fair, and have incredible networks which the National Gallery would find hard to reach without this young audience. The new learning strategy is going to support children and young people's skills and agency when they need it most, and harness their huge creativity, empowering them to inspire other people of all ages and really bring the collection alive. The Learning and National Programmes team at the National Gallery have all recently had training in philosophy for children and in developing oracy skills through talking about and reflecting on paintings by the Hugh Hall Centre for Spoken Communication at the University of Cambridge. If you're interested in this area, I recommend a book, which I'm still partway through, by one of the people who contributed to this training, Professor Neil Mercer, written with Professor Karen Littleton. It's called Interthinking, Putting Talk to Work, published by Routledge, and it explores the growing body of work on how people think creatively and productively together, including in school settings and workplaces. We also have growing evidence that pilot projects, such as the National Gallery Take One Picture programme for Northampton Primary Academy Trust Partnership, have an impact on children's agency, social skills, cultural capital, oracy and writing skills. As you will of course be very aware, it's often through art that children can express their ideas and values. A member of my team, Catherine Spanky, who I believe is here today, worked with children last year to create a film about another painting in our collection, Men of the Docks by George Bellows, which was the focus of our Take One Picture programme last year. The painting represents a view of dock workers in Brooklyn on a cold winter's day in the early 20th century. The children mused on the experience of the men freezing cold with buildings of a more wealthy Manhattan dominating the skyline. You can see the short film through the link, which I think Sophie's going to kindly share in the chat. The children's responses were perceptive, funny, empathetic, and imbued with strong values and kindness. For example, one boy said, "I think it would be hard to leave another country because you've lived there so long that you might have got used to it and you just don't want to leave all your memories there." When we shared this film on YouTube, responses from adults were heartening and showed how children can have a positive impact on adults' understanding of art. For example, one person said, "I learnt so much about this painting by listening to the children's observations. Without them, I would probably not have appreciated it so much. More of the same, please." We also shared children's artwork on 60 digital billboards across England and Scotland during lockdown. These had over 10 million viewings and we hope inspired many other children and adults who saw them. To conclude, having worked on projects which support children and young people's agency over the last 20 years or more, predominantly in my last role at Turner Contemporary, where I instigated many projects led in partnership with children, I'm now incredibly excited to work with the Learning and National Programmes team at the National Gallery to develop our understanding of how to genuinely support children's leadership through the arts. So by enabling children and young people to explore the collection through interthinking, talking, making and experimenting with materials, they will in turn help us to achieve our new vision for learning, which is art enriching lives, enriching art. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. That was a wonderful presentation and response to the video from the children that we saw earlier on. I was really interested in how you presented a view of childhood through the National Gallery collection, and in fact I think that many of the points that you raise in terms of, you know, thinking about the position of children as active participants in our society, in our culture, and how engagement with cultural institutions like museums and galleries can support the development of children's agency and cultural capital and critical thinking, is just the perfect segue into introducing Wendy James, who has been working on a project called My Primary School in the Museum for several years, and I think I mean I have some personal experience of the work that Wendy has been doing, and she's able to provide children who otherwise might not have opportunity or access to participate in culture that really is their birthright. And these are really important issues, I think, that we as art and design educators need to consider. So Wendy, if I just introduce Wendy briefly, and before I hand over to her, Wendy James is an architect and partner at Garbers and James Architects, and is a passionate advocate for children's learning and access to cultural spaces. Education lies at the heart of many of Garbers and James's projects, including facilities for preschool and families, primary, secondary, higher education, and third age sectors. Learning is a vital component in Garbers and James's museum, healthcare, and dedicated educational projects. My Primary School is at the Museum is a project which was developed by the Cultural Institute at King's College London against a backdrop of threatened museum services, a shortage of school places, and ever-growing evidence to support the range of benefits of learning in cultural environments and through collections. It tested the benefits of co-locating primary and nursery school classes for extended periods of time within a museum. The project began with an idea conceived by architect Wendy James to one day see the creation of a permanent museum school. My Primary School is at the museum tested the hypothesis that there may be beneficial learning, social and cultural outcomes for primary school children and their families when a significant portion of their learning takes place in a museum setting, as well as demonstrating the benefits for museums. Today, Wendy is joined by Laura Emanuel, who will be presenting after Wendy. Laura is a classroom teacher from St Thomas Community Primary School in Swansea and is one of the pilot schools for the project. So at this stage, I'll just hand over to Wendy.
Hello, everybody. It's as other people have already said, it's really lovely to have been asked to speak, and I'm really glad that Laura's here with me. She's going to. The plan is I'm going to do about 20 minutes, and then Laura's going to come in with about 10. So I'm going to share my screen now and tell you a little bit more about the project. I'm going to give you I hope, a whistle-stop tour through the sort of thinking and what actually happened, a little bit of the development, and then I'm going to hand over to Laura, who can tell you about what it's like at the sharp end of things, which is being a classroom teacher, being thrown in at the deep end. So here, let's hope I can get this. Can everybody see that? Is that okay? Is that full screen?
It's not full screen, but we can see the slides, Wendy.
Wait a moment. Why wasn't that? Oh, that's funny, isn't it? We rehearsed it before. All of a sudden it's not working. Hang on a second. Let me just get that. View. Oops, sorry. That was wrong. Sorry. View. Get that. I'll be with you in just a sec. Hang on, sorry. Voila. Let me just tap. Yeah, okay. So here I am. So I am an architect. So I always feel that there's an element of being an imposter with this project, because I'm neither, in one sense, a museum professional nor a teacher, of course, in the educational sense. But I have been responsible for designing and delivering a huge range of public cultural projects, museums, including a lot of museums and galleries, regionally and nationally in the UK, as well as internationally. So the epiphany for this idea, and it sort of was an epiphany, it wasn't a big religious moment, but it was when I was being, more than 10 years ago, we were working on what's called the strategic plan for Salisbury Cathedral and the Close. And we were looking at all sorts of elements, not just the cathedral's own work, but learning. They happened to have the best copy of the Magna Carta there, and so a museum of element of museum, music, and there was a school there, and we were at a meeting in the evening, and I just got stuck mentally because somebody whose child was at this beautiful school down there in the bottom right-hand corner said, the only thing is we haven't got loads of computers and we haven't got an indoor playing field. I thought, hang on. And my brain sort of lodged at that, and it got stuck and said, you may not have that, but that's so easy to fix. You know, computers are 2 a penny around the corner. We can sort that out. And there's nothing wrong with playing football outside. But what your children have is this. And I could not believe the quality of this object. You know, when it was built, looked like a rocket at Cape Canaveral, but you could do everything: physics, maths, music. You've got huge numbers of nationalities, different language, nature. There are the water meadows, the ecology of it. I just sort of thought, what can't you learn just by using nothing except where you are? I was kind of perplexed. So, and this is in the context, this is my sort of, I was project architect actually before I started my own practice in 2006, beginning of. I was project architect and a senior associate of a man called Daniel Liebeskind, and this was one of my jobs, so the Imperial War Museum for the North, Trafford, Manchester. So I was used to dealing with whole museums, including not only the design, but the development of the brief and the co-curation of programs that went into the museums, including learning. I did the same for Tate Modern, where I actually wasn't the architect, but I worked to Nick Sirota and Alex Beard to write the brief and do all the design management of it. But it was on the basis of having worked out what the museum needed. And it was when I really started to work with the Director for Learning, Anna Cutler, who's actually on the point of leaving. So now, but I got very involved in the actual programs. And what I sort of discovered in this sort of context was that, you know, nobody in the world says you've got to have museums and galleries. Everybody in the world says you've got to have schools. if we put the two together, because there was a shortage of school places, and I really felt that probably the, you know, the proverbial tip of the iceberg, children would come and do the favourite 10 things or something, but I knew what was behind the scenes, what lies in the stores, what stories the curators have, which of course are projected wonderfully in our museums, but probably you're barely dipping your toe in the water compared to what's available. And so I developed this program. I was in my head. I did lots of personal work around it. My qualifications otherwise are I'm a mother, I'm even a grandmother by now. And I adore taking kids to museums, galleries, and any other setting. And King's, I was teaching a bit of a unit there for them on Towards Tomorrow's Museum in conjunction with King's, as well as doing this job at the Tate. And they said, this sounds really interesting. And actually, these are some of Laura's little babes who are no doubt twice my size by now. But they said, but they were very interested in it, said, Wendy, can you find the projects? We'll look for pilot projects. So I ploughed up and down the country around and about my day job as an architect, and we got backing to do sort of proof of concept pilots. And just to give you an idea, this is back in 2016, 2017 sort of time. Now, I just want to tell you, because Rachel comes from there, having done the work, now there's a new home, because actually the results were jolly good. We had to fly the nest of King's, that was just part of the deal. And now it's clearly worthy. I'm going to explain to you how it's snowballed, and how we really feel we need to do some solid research and then apply increasingly for funding so that we can start to roll it out, but with real proof of concept. That says add link. That doesn't sound right, but sorry, we'll tell you about that later. So this is where the projects are or were: one up in the north in South Shields, one at Tate Liverpool, and one down in Swansea, which is where Laura's school is, just so you can see. And they were very different places. So here's up at the mouth of the Tyne. There's the little red dot there shows you this, which is the Roman fort at the end of the Tyne. All of it is an archaeological museum. It's full of genuine artifacts. This is reconstructions not only of the gatehouse, but also of the commander's house and so forth. So, and the children had as a little base, those little sort of bungalow looking like structures are actually the museum and the archaeologist's office. So that's where the children were based. Others, and sorry, they were there for 11 weeks and they were 9 and 10 years old. At Tate, we had little nursery children in, looking at the Razzle Dazzle ferry. And Laura's place is down in Swansea, right on the coast, near the dock area, the marina, and the school not far, school just at the top right of this overview. And there we are. Here's, we also made the cut of the Museums Change Lives work that the Museum Association were doing at the time. And here's my primary school at the museum, which was cited. And there's a summary of it. Teachers, parents and staff all remarked on the difference it made, with many children growing in confidence as they learned about the objects. And in this case in Swansea, there were 2 projects, both of 5 weeks each, Laura's class and the sister class in a 2-class intake school. So that was that. So the end of that time, these were the recommendations that people should generally support these extended, it was immersive, in-depth, cross-curricular. So really saying, this is where I go to school for that period of time. We're going to do all our learning here. And for us to disseminate the evidence, which we've been doing, to provide specialist training for teaching in these settings. Well, this is beginning to happen. So Rachel is testament to the fact that it's coming into the STEAM research group at Oxford Brookes, and it's also being, well, I know that quite a lot of the student teachers are already aware of the project as a result, and it's winding into their training. The same certainly happens in Laura's case, looking to Swansea, the National Waterfront Museum. They work with Trinity St David's and also in Swansea, the local colleges. And in fact, as the projects, which I'll rattle through a bit later on, nearly everyone has got a university or a teacher training college overlooking, watching over these. Not is yet by way of big formal research, but certainly in terms of evaluation and development. And we're trying to get this all to stick together to be an even bigger snowball. We have a practical toolkit, which is now has just gone onto the STEAM research website at Oxford Brook, so we can steer you towards that. And excuse me, and we're it's very clear that it's a matter of partnership. So all of the settings working with nurseries and schools in the near neighbourhood, by and large. So finally, we're developing a sense of how we do this in best practice. Just to give you a few more pictures of the sorts of, you know, the time during the day that these children had. Here they were in, actually, this is outside, this is fresh air, and this was between Christmas and Easter that year. So the kids were outside doing all sorts of things. On the math side, they were looking at Roman numerals and looking at volumes of grain silos and all sorts of strange things. They were cooking. They were looking at the form of clothing, at the lives they led. You know, the why was the fort there in the first place, and so on and so forth. And they also had access to an incredible number of objects. It's our own Pompeii. There was a massive fire there, very like Pompeii. And so a lot of very small objects and jewellery survive in the ash. So people were learning inside and outside, developing actually through all of these projects a sense of place. It's really learning outside the classroom in that sense. What is their community and neighbourhood like, and how does it fit in? But all of these projects have seen the children very much outside, which in COVID / post-COVID territory, you know, it's got to be healthier. Liverpool, the kids were smaller. They were only there for 2 weeks. Nevertheless, they owned it. And that we had a wonderful art facilitator to top up the nursery teaching assistants, and other things happened. So not only were children learning, but on the social and behavioural side, they were often eating together in a different way. And we did all sorts of risk assessments, and we had operating manuals. We all thought about how they would meet the community otherwise in the museums and galleries or otherwise. And really, it was this point that was mentioned earlier, actually, in those paintings from the National Gallery. The children, in a way, seem to behave almost like just small grown-ups, small citizens. And one of the places this has gone to is actually Norway and Bergen. And that's exactly what Bergen have really pushed in this project. They want the children to feel and understand that they belong to Bergen, that this is a gorgeous city, it belongs to them, and they take them to all of these places to make them feel like small Bergen cities. And so it's very much a matter of real world learning. So here at Tate, the children are actually having their meals in the Tate Cafe. Some of those children had never been in a cafe or restaurant with others. Here they are exploring, doing all sorts of things. I mean, look, actually, you know, this works in a gallery, a picture gallery too. I was even sort of wondering about the chosen work today, and knowing when I do my drawing classes, you know, you have to sort of think, okay, how do we talk totally cross-curricular in such a place? But even in pictures, the way they're set up, there are armatures and geometries. There's the physics of the light and the colour. There's, you know, in the Lautrec piece, there's Paris, there's the language, there's the social history, there's the material, you know, what are they sitting on, all the different forms of material, timber and the velvet. You have to, I mean, okay, you can be quite it's a little bit tortuous in a way, but nevertheless, it's once the children have the picture, you can actually write down all of the words that are triggered from this picture, not only their feelings and not only, you know, this very, very important love and community and friendship, which, you know, you have to ask yourself, can you conjure that up so easily in class with, you know, or how much more valuable, how much richer is it to have these sorts of objects with which to do that? The object which, you know, as it happens, belongs to the children and the nation. So being outside, understanding where that museum is, where we are in Liverpool, why we're here by the water, very important. How does it belong to me and my family? And of course, the children are a bit of a hook. You know, it's like going fishing, throwing your bait out. So the kids go to the museum, guess what? The family comes with them, at least at some point. So I visited these projects on days when the families were invited in to see the children. I expect maybe Laura can say a bit more about that. I know in the evaluation that not only were, well, in fact, we missed Kate, the evaluator. There was a picture of her there. Not only were were she amongst the children, but she was talking to the teachers, to the head, to the family.
Including Tony Paul, who later became director.
Oh, something happened. I hope that's okay. So here we are in Swansea. One of the things I want to tell you is that we just found, if anybody's thinking of doing this, you've got the whole setting, wherever you are, you do need a safe nest to retreat to. So something a bit like a classroom. So these were a few slides I actually put together with my daughter, funnily enough, thinking, well, you know, how can we represent this project? The museum or the setting you choose is at the heart of the community. Ideally, it would be within a 20-minute walk so that you can actually include walking as part of the programme to get there. Sometimes with smaller children, you need a bus ride. And that was one of the things that was one of the few things we had to fund. None of these projects cost a lot of money. And indeed, Laura will also tell you that once you've decided to do it, it's a question, I think, of just using your budgets a bit more creatively. To begin with, people were worried about it. But you have to also know that for school to come in, maybe they've got a different timetable from you. So what's the way in? How does that sit? You need a safe nest, and you've got to think, you know, it's like a lot of architecture. A lot of it's about toilets and how are they going to meet the public, and can you go into the galleries, and how can you retreat? So are toilets going to be dedicated for the children, or do you need to toilet them and police that? So safeguarding, safeguarding, safeguarding. Toilets and lunch, big deal. Where can they have a break? Even though it's a gorgeous environment, where can they go elsewhere? And there will be other learning people coming through. So your inhabiting, your residency can't stop the rest of the organisation functioning. So that's also fine. And in fact, we had also up in Arbea this thing happening where the children became very expert in it and were able to lead guided tours for their families and for all the other years in the school. They came over 10 or 11 weeks. They had archaeologists as well. So, and we have to look after the staff who and their teaching assistants. It was a question of dovetailing with the museum learning officers and other people around. So here we are, this is Swansea. This is, you know, objects, maybe material science boxes, all sorts of stories. Here's lunchtime, free lunches in a room that was made. This is one of the things we had to sort out, but we did. And it is honestly everything about the title of what people are thinking of here. Children's voice, giving the children their voices. This was one of the things that the power of language seemed to ramp up in all cases, even the little ones. There were children who just started to talk in a way that they absolutely didn't in school or in the nursery, and giving them, in doing this cross-curricular thing. So the social equity comes from this first point, you know, nobody says you've got to go to a museum or have a museum. Everybody says you've got to go to school. If you put the school in the museum, then all the children get to go to the museum in a way that perhaps only a select few otherwise would. So the social equity builds, the cultural capital builds, and the science capital as well, because if you do cross-curricular stuff, you begin to really offer that right across the board. And once the children and their families understand they're really allowed, these are places for them, then you've given them a key, because they then know as they grow up, not only can we just keep going back to our favourite local museum that we now know so well, but actually when we go to another city, we know we can walk in there. It belongs to us. It's a real key. Here they are, stories. All the children are given voices. I mean, in the National Museum of Wales, they're given Welsh voices and English voices. I mean, that was one of the things, that there was bilingual opportunities here, also for the museum to develop and for the museum to learn from having the project and to improve their interpretation. Stories, language, and through all of that seems to come confidence. Here's another thing, we've gone into the Botanic Gardens. I know Kate Noble is around somewhere, and the project went into the Fitzwilliam at Cambridge, but it twinned with the Botanic Gardens, and you'll see that. But here's an example in Glasgow where, you know, if you can really hang on to kids in these sorts of settings, and this was a full immersion Spanish camp. I mean, you can do this in museums too. I've been listening to a project about actually meeting points for the Iraqi community in Oxford at the History of Science Museum today. We're all creative. I happen to be an architect, and so I spend a lot of time trying to be creative, and I absolutely believe that the children have it. Nick Sirota went from Tate to lead the Arts Council England, and his opening speech was naming the Durham Commission for Creativity and looking at creativity in education, and this project became cited as a reference project. We all of us need the physical world to understand our world, and I think this, and especially perhaps with COVID and us all living here on these, you know, in our little pigeonhole boxes on Zoom, it's easy to lose touch with that. But this is Patrick Geddes, happened to be an architect as well as an educationalist, and his whole thing was fire up the heart first, give the children their passion. What are they really interested in? And museums and galleries and botanic gardens have lots of different things, so there's something for everybody. So what does this child, what fires up this kid? Get their hands into it, get their bodies into it, get them, it goes in, and then afterwards start thinking about it. And here is me, here I am, I should say, here is me. Here I am with my assistant Joe and Professor Carlos Frank, and he was putting us into his 3D model of the cosmos. He's Professor of Computational Cosmology, winner of the Royal Society Gold Medal, and he has this phenomenal institute and research people with people all around the world. Those physicists, when we did, I was involved in providing that new faculty building, they need, as well as their phenomenal mathematical models, which of course only live in their minds and in their computers, but they wanted to have these maquettes, I'm going to show you in a second, in the same building, because when they come out for breaks, they like to see physical models of things as a starting point for their modeling. So this is the sort of thing, this is an artist, John Robinson, also a physicist. And these are, we have the maquettes, we had about 50 or 60 of them in different vitrines around that faculty. So big brains still need physical objects. They can't just do it from nothing. It helps everybody, the form. So does dance. This is another museum I'm involved in. Dance and food and culture, and you can so often find this in all of these settings. It's not just about history. I did have an idea that maybe these museums could become have sort of making schools, what I call making, where museums as knowledgeable environments. I know what's happened. This is the slightly older one. It should say knowledgeable. I've clicked on the wrong one. Never mind. Here are Botanic Gardens, because we really went into that. I do a lot of work with the Botanic Garden Education Network. you can imagine what a fantastic setting that is for children. And in particular, what they do there, the power of drawing rather than just language. Laura will also talk about this. In all of our projects, we've seen the most amazing drawings come out. And this is also very grown up, because as any botanist, or in this case, our arboriculturist or a tree expert will tell you, if you take a photograph of it, it flattens it. You can't see what's what. The most fantastic books are all even just made, are hand drawn. 2000 trees. This is a very recent book. And here are the children. Kate would have known these in the Botanic Garden in Cambridge, the University Botanic Garden. And here they were, same children. They twinned with the Fitzwilliam. And the day I visited in the Fitzwilliam, the children had been in the garden the day before, been collecting all sorts of bugs and sticks and all sorts of things. And then they went into the Fitzwilliam, and on that day, they were trying to find the things they might have found in the garden. So you can see the beautiful statue there. And I was going to show you more. They were also looking for the bugs in the Dutch sort of 16th, 17th century paintings. You know how you see those caterpillars crawling around, and of course they had the hungry caterpillar. What did I just say? We're all in the museum, in the gallery. There's me, my family comes with me somehow, my teacher's there, my school's there, my community's there. So you can start to create a whole world with equity, with diversity, and including everybody. Also, museums are so good at being inclusive environments physically, and just the sorts of, look, this is the Kew Gardens, the beehive, the giant beehive that was that big, that let you walk into it. It was wired to the bees in a beehive elsewhere in the gardens, and then you could hear them. You could hear the activity of the bees. But once you have such an object, you can begin to identify with them. You can pretend to be a bee, and you can think about all the things they're doing in there. But if a bee is if it's just a picture even in a book or on a screen, it doesn't have the same impact. So get bodily in there. So all the links are quite complicated, but if you would like to know more about this, be on our network so that we can fully update you and put you in touch also with the STEAM website and all the resources on it. If in the first place you write to us at Garbers and James, I can also put this in the chat, then we'll put you on it, and there we go. I hope I haven't been too long.
No, Wendy, that was wonderful, and I put a link to the Oxford Brookes STEAM web pages in the chat as well, so people can access that.
And the Twitter, there's a Twitter as well. I'm sorry, I am silly. I've clicked on the last edition of this. Never mind, I've done it.
Thank you. That's great, Wendy. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Laura.
Yes.
Hi all. Thanks very much for having me here tonight. I'm very excited to talk to you. Just a disclaimer, I am not related to Wendy or anyone in the project. I'm not being paid any additional money for this. I am purely here because I cannot stress how much I love the idea of combining our children with the most wonderful settings. I'll just share my screen with you because I've just got a couple of slides to show you. Hopefully it works. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Oh, fabulous. We're off to a good start. So my primary school is at the museum. This was a good few years ago now. So before I start talking, my son, I realize I'm talking anyway, but before I start talking about this, my son is in the school now. I've moved him because he would be in the class with the children who went to the museum. Having spent time at the museum with these children, I saw how absolutely beautiful they were and thought I wanted my son to be a part of their class. I went to get him earlier to bring him home early so that I could be here. And the children in the class said, "Where's he going? Why are you going early?" And I explained that we're going to talk about the museum project. Now, bear in mind, these children are in year 5 now. They were in reception at the time. And they all say, oh, the museum, Robin Goch. And they just started firing things at me that they can remember from this residency that was many years ago for them. You know, it's been a long time, and they still remember it and they still cherish it. So that pretty much says it all. So my primary school is at the museum. Just got to work out how to move to the next slide. There we go. Okay, this is a photo. We've got Anna and Jude holding a gun at summer. This was very similar to the face I pulled when my boss called me in to say that I would be taking my reception class to the museum for 5 weeks. A call had come through while he was on paternity leave, and the deputy head answered the phone and agreed to it. And yeah, it was decided it would be reception, as the other classes were sitting the national tests in the summer. We didn't really know what the project would entail, and yeah, I was quite scared. I didn't feel qualified to take a class to a museum. I didn't feel like I had enough experience of museums myself. I didn't feel I would be able to meet the criteria of teaching from a museum. Actually, between us, you don't need anything to teach from a museum. Anybody can do it because it's all there for you, and the children teach themselves. It's amazing. So we had a meeting, a formal meeting. I was very scared about that. Again, back to this face of fear. And after the meeting, I started to calm down and think, it's okay, because I realized the museum were just as scared as us. That was great news for me. We were both really scared. It was the unknown. They weren't used to small children going. So they were also a little terrified by this. Initial problems. Here you will see Evie J and Anna. Anna is pointing out something. This is how the other staff in the school pointed out problems to me. You could see the face of concern. People were worried about funding. How much was this going to cost? You know, money is huge in schools. It's huge everywhere. But funding was certainly a big issue. The logistics, as Wendy mentioned, toileting, the public being there, breaks, lunch times, all of these things were huge potential problems. Transport, how are we going to get all of those little legs to get down to the museum safely? Would standards slip? Would they be missing 5 weeks of education? All of this seems so silly now, but at the time, before we knew, these were potential problems. The parents, how would they react to their very young children being taken out of the school, which is their safe place, for 5 weeks? And the children's well-being, would they suffer? Would they become too tired? Would it be too stressful? Would they not enjoy? None of these were problems, can I just add? They really weren't problems. We overcame all of them. Funding, you can access funding. And actually, as Wendy said, you don't need very much. It's all there. Logistics can be overcome. We didn't actually take lunch breaks because it was such a pleasure to eat with the children. And I know that any teachers that hear that will think, no, we need a coffee. Actually, we went to the museum coffee shop, bought our coffees and went and sat with the children. It was just a beautiful family environment. Standards did not slip. They moved in different areas. So, okay, we didn't do a science experiment in the classroom that we may have done, but their standards in oracy, reading, the writing, the opportunities, and most importantly, the social skills skyrocketed. Parental support. The parents were also, majority hadn't visited the museum. They also felt that it wasn't for them. They weren't educated enough to go there. It just wasn't their sort of thing. But they trusted us and they said, okay, we said to them, we'll give it a go. If it doesn't work, we'll pull it back. The parents were fully on board by the end. They came along for a day and they had the best time. And I know that the parents now visit the museum for enjoyment on their own. So it's opened doors to parents that certainly wouldn't have opened otherwise. And well-being, the children, as I told you, they're still talking about it. They loved it. So I met with the education officer in the museum and we just bounced ideas off each other. And that initial chat is crucial because the museum need to know what the school are looking for. and the school want to know what the museum can offer. So that we just sort of threw out, okay, you're a waterfront museum about transport, so we'll make transport our topic. This is what we do in school. What can you tell us? We linked it to the curriculum, we linked it to the 4 purposes, and it just knitted together so beautifully. That conversation is wonderful. A quick plan, I think it took us, Lisa in the museum and myself, we were probably about an hour, and we had thrashed out 5 weeks worth of learning. The outcome. So here they all are. They look so tiny now, and they are absolutely massive, these children. So don't be fooled by these little faces. And very confident children, which I personally feel a lot of that is because of the experience they had here. The outcome was that we had on-hand resources, things that we absolutely would not have had in the classroom. The things that you see the children holding, they would have been flat pictures on a PowerPoint that I had pulled from Google. So the fact that they got to handle and hold and create was just wonderful. Their social skills improved. These tiny little children would have been part of a giant school hall eating their dinner. Their voices are drowned. It's an overwhelming atmosphere. They just loved it. You could see by their faces. They felt posh. They were eating, you know, the grown-up food that came from the museum cafe and restaurant, and they just adored it. They had the best time eating, and they ate with their teachers, so they really felt big. Families came down. They would not have walked through that door unless they could go with each other, so it was a great opportunity for them. We had extra space. What a valuable tool that was. We sort of took over one of the rooms and made it our classroom. So we continued with our normal schoolwork within that classroom, whilst having the opportunity to send groups off elsewhere, to link it to opportunities in the museum. We really took over the whole place. But for such a big building, we were tiny, but for us, the opportunity was huge. The children became better associated with their local area. Despite living just a short walk away, many of them have not visited the marina that you can see in the photo in the bottom corner there. They've not visited the beach. They have now, because now that they're confident, they've nagged their parents to take them back, and they go regularly. But that was a huge, huge part of it. They know where they're from, they know what's around them, and they know what they're going to grow up into with all of those opportunities for them. You can see the children. This was the very last day. Behind the camera is a wet, soggy, sobbing teacher, quite sad to leave, looking down the aisle at the children holding hands. Nobody asked them to hold hands, but that is the bond that they have formed. In the years since, I don't see this in school. They don't sit in the classroom holding hands with each other. That's how closely they felt knitted to each other. The opportunities the museum offered us were endless. They have so many links. Like, they're very, very well hooked up people, as you guys will know. It was a case of, we wanted to read a book about the sea or transport. Oh, we know a local author, he will come in. Then his wife was an illustrator. So all of a sudden we've got the most professional art and literacy lessons. I could never have provided such a wealth of opportunity in school. So that was fantastic. There were so many opportunities. I think it comes up further on. If not, I will talk about it. But the experiences, we were sat in the classroom one day, and we'd been working all morning, and we didn't have any workshops planned. And we just looked at each other and said, let's go. We packed our bags. We went down to the beach, which was, again, a minute away. And we just played on the beach. It was so beautiful. That sense of freedom was exactly what we needed. Curriculum and rights, they did not suffer. What the children are holding in this top picture, these little tickets. So we give our children 6 words a week to learn. And they're just on paper. They cut them out, they hide them around the house, so they hide them around the school, and they have to go and look for the word and read the word, and that's an activity we do. In the museum, they were given their 6 words, and they were told to go and read all of the wonderful exhibits and the writing that goes with them, and to find their words in real life situations. You can tell they were so excited. It was like looking for treasure. So, okay, they couldn't read the whole piece of text, but they're already now learning that when they go somewhere and if there's information, that's for them to look at. It was wonderful. And they certainly picked up their reading words. Confidence. This little girl is so shy and nervous. She was scared of her own shadow. Her mum used to bring her in every day, normally in tears to start with, until she warmed up. And here she is. She has strolled her way around the museum, down the ramp towards the marina, where the museum have arranged for a trawler boat to bring us their catch. She is holding the most horrid sea creature I have ever seen. It wasn't just 8 legs, it was beyond 8 legs. There were legs on legs. And this little girl who's petrified of life has just gone in the bucket, picked it up and put it on her hand to show everybody. I really think that her face says it all there. Absolutely wonderful. The thinking skills, I mean, the children just didn't stop thinking. You can't, your brain is in overload. There's so much around you. They are surrounded by not just my lovely twinkle displays in the classroom, but they have everything to look at. It's ever changing. There were big windows to look out, so they had the constant public setting that changed. They had different resources. The museum had a gallery that was ever changing. Every week it would sort of be a new theme. It was just wonderful. Staff, we were close-knit. We were very, very close-knit by the end. We became best friends because you are living in each other's pockets. You're in a heightened environment. You are constantly counting how many children are there and then double counting, and you're all counting. And it was quite intense, but in a very positive way. We depended on each other and we had trust in each other. And it just gave us a new outlook at how your school can indeed become a school within a museum. And the bond is wonderful. 2 huge parts of the project, the biggest for me, equity. School projects normally consist of a small group of well-presented, articulate and confident children. I apologise for the lack of commas. I had to decide between punctuation or a cute font, and I'm very sorry I chose the font, but I appreciate there should be commas within that. So yeah, we know what it's like in school. The smartest, most clean looking children will be chosen to go and present to people, and they're the confident ones, they're the ones who speak well, they speak clearly. But what about all of the others? What about the rest of the children who don't get chosen, who may say the wrong thing, who may say nothing? Those children are quite often left behind. This project gave them the opportunity to find what they are looking for, to have a range of opportunities for everybody. The second they walked into that museum, it was an even playing field. There was no preconceived ideas of, they know that they can't read. They know that they're not going to be asked to go and talk to a different teacher. They know they're not going to get to show their work to somebody. This was a brand new opportunity, a fresh start. Even at 4 and 5, they know that when they go into school, quite often they're overlooked, or they don't say the right thing, they can't access the learning. And this was just wonderful for them to have that opportunity. So it was great. And they found their voice, because we had children who didn't speak in school. You couldn't stop them. They had so much to say, because suddenly everything was theirs and they had the opportunity to talk. So in light of COVID, I know it's a dirty word, I'm sorry, but in light of COVID, we have got to think about how the museum project is going to be wonderful moving forwards. Obviously, we've all been locked up for over a year. The social benefits of the museum are immeasurable. The children bonded better with each other. They bonded better with their teachers. We had a closer relationship with the family because we had to stay in touch with them so much more. They needed to know their children were safe throughout the day. social benefits were fantastic. The manners the children learnt were wonderful because they had to open doors, they had to wait for other people to come through, they had to learn when to be noisy and when to listen. Missed opportunities, our children have missed quite a lot, as have we in the last year. We need to make up for that, and I can't think of a better way to do it than a project like this. Outdoors, they need fresh air. They need it, they need it. We've gone from being locked up at home to now being back in a classroom for hours a day. And, you know, we need to get them back out. So anxiety, obviously children, we have seen a surge with children. The parents are concerned, they're anxious, they have mental health concerns. They're worried that the children now don't know how to react to things. They don't know how to respond to each other. The museum will completely deal with that because they just bond. Intergenerational, probably the biggest word I've used in a while. We are currently reading, we've got reading buddies with silver listeners and our children. It's not just children who have suffered. I think it was William from the video we saw earlier who said about friendships and how hard friendships are to make when you're older, which brought a tear, but it's so true. The museum was full of the older generation and they were just beaming. They'd see our little teeny tots coming through and they'd get so excited and they'd want to talk to the children. Why not make that a part of it? That's so important for the older generation as well as our children. And the music, right, okay, I've got so much to say. What happened next? There's only a couple of slides left though, I promise. What happened next at the museum? So we've got a stronger than ever relationship with them. They've done a recent garden project, which our children were involved with, involving the community and revamping their garden for purpose. This photo you see with, it's a mum with the gorgeous big hair and her little boy Jude. She did not want Jude to take part in this project. Jude wouldn't cope, it was too scary and she was really nervous. This is her with Jude in the museum. They had the best time for 5 weeks. That photo is in their living room. Okay, the photo in the top corner, I spoke to Lisa, the education officer at the museum during lockdown, and she said, how are things? Yeah, very good. She said, oh, what are you guys doing at the minute? I said, oh, we're about to do Celts. And she said, have you accessed our online Celts workshop? No, she sent me a link. All of a sudden, the whole of Key Stage 2 had from Amgueddfa Cymru, the Welsh Museums Association, they had set up links where there was a gentleman walking around being a Celt. They did a live Zoom workshop with us. So we kept that relationship going and are now adapting to using it in the classroom. It's wonderful. Our school. You cannot do a project like this and leave it alone. It's criminal. If you're going to do the project, you've got to keep it going. We don't do 5 weeks anymore. Sadly, I wish we did, but we still keep a residency and we believe in it so much we've rolled it out to every year group. The reception children continue to go to the museum. It's wonderful. Year 1, go to the local community. We base ourselves in the local church and we go to the shops, we go to the parks. The head teacher gave them all £1 to go into the shop to buy something. I convinced him by telling him we were going to do money and change. Actually, they all bought a slushie, which was £1. So there was no learning opportunity for maths there. But the social skill was wonderful. They learned how to speak to somebody working in a shop with respect. It was great. How to take a turn. Helping others in year 2. We have had the biggest police horse I've ever seen in my life in our school yard for the children to go and see it and learn about police horses. We went down to the fire station for them to learn. The ambulance service, dentist, doctors. So that's what they do in year 2. Year 3, go to work. There is a hotel just across the road with a room that they can base themselves in. They can learn about local businesses. Our parents who have their business or where they work that can get involved. So we're now bringing the parents back in again. Wonderful. Year 4, look at cultures. So they visit local mosques, synagogues. The university have got a synagogue. We've got a link with the university as well. And then with the church, it's fantastic. We've just had a huge Eid celebration, which was wonderful. COVID friendly. And year 5s go to St Maddox, which is a local residential setting. So the children go down there, they then start staying overnight. And then Manor Adventures is far more physical. They go rafting, and it's a little scary, but nothing scares us anymore because we've done this. We are ready for anything. So you have to keep it going because the benefits are just unbelievable. And it doesn't have to be a museum, although museums are beautiful and wonderful. You can really make the most of this model anywhere. And yeah, we just implore you to think about what could you do. Everybody has a part to play in bringing up our children, and I think we can all do the best we can and have a think about what you could do to help. Thank you so much for listening to me drivel on. I can't stress how passionate I am about this, so if I can do anything to help you, please shout. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That was such a passionate presentation. Well done. You can see lots of people clapping in the and cheering. Wait, that was amazing. Thank you. I think we've got about 5 minutes for questions. So if anybody has questions for any of the speakers, the presenters today, please do pop them into the chat or pop your hand up and we will call on you. I want to I'm just going to go through the chat and have a look. There was one question that came in earlier for Karen, and I don't want to miss Karen out. It was oh, I'm sorry, I can't find it. There was a question, Karen, about the video link that Sophie posted in the chat when you were presenting. Could you explain a little bit about the purpose of the video link?
Yeah, sure. So that was a One Painting, Many Voices video that the National Gallery makes about our paintings anyway, but usually it's by adults and people that are seen as having either a kind of lived experience that relates to the painting or some art historical expertise. So as part of our sort of move towards, I guess, flipping hierarchies of knowledge and acknowledging that children, as we've seen today, can help adults as much as the other way around. That's what drives me, really, that we can all learn together. That's one of the many things where children were given the power to create one of those videos around the George Bellows painting. But there'll be many other forms, and that's one example of how that's happened.
That's lovely. Thank you, Karen. I'm going to move on. This was not so much a question, but a comment from Emma Hall. And this was in response to Wendy's presentation. And Emma is asking, or she's commenting about science capital and cultural capital, and where she considers science capital to be underneath the umbrella of cultural capital, and cultural capital to encompass everything. And I just wondered whether or not Wendy had a thought on that.
I do. I actually think the same myself secretly, but the only reason I put in a but was when I first started, I was slightly nervous because people were only, I kept thinking the way the language was going with people, they were only regarding it as an arts project. And you can perhaps imagine, as an architect, I sort of sit there between the two. And so for me, I come back to that other categorization. Things are either a matter of nature or culture, and clearly the science might explain the nature, or at least the interest, but it's very much part of culture. I completely understand that, but I just wanted to make sure that the children were doing their science as well, even in an art gallery, let's say. For instance, I mean, that picture that we just looked at with the shipyard, the shipping in Manhattan and so forth, the minute you look at it, you immediately feel, you know, the metal and the noise and the weather actually overlooking Manhattan there, you know, from Brooklyn, and all of those sorts of things. And I think it's, I'll give you another example about science and culture. And it only occurred to me, why didn't I think of this before? You know, if this wonderful, I said this to one or two colleagues, if this, you know, incredibly erudite Neil McGregor can tell the whole history of the world in 100 objects, and we've got museums and museums and galleries and botanic gardens, we've got millions and millions and millions of objects, it's obvious that they hold phenomenal quantities of information. But I wonder how many of you might have just caught him just before Christmas on the radio, where he selected object number 101 to mark 10 years after that radio series. And now I'm sorry, I've got a brain like a sieve, I'm not very good at names, but the artist, the sculptor and a poet worked together, and this wonderful artist, who's Syrian, made an installation which has gone around the world. It went into Venice and various things, of little boats which were refugee boats, made from old rusty bits of bicycle mudguard, and then the people in the boats made from nails. And if you saw the materiality and the way that they were placed in different places, and then you read the poem that went with it, this has become the composite, the two pieces together, the conversation have become object 101. If children could see that and could understand not only the materiality of the sculpture, but also the writing, but the sculpture then takes you into our geography. You know, where do those people come from? Where are their languages? Where are their cultures? So you've got this tiny object and a poem, but it's, you know, you could talk for 5 or 6 hours about it. I mean, I went to a presentation about it that was about an hour and a half long, but I think a child of almost any age would get it. It's one of those egg solutions. You use an object, a material object, and it has all of that in it. But I wanted to make sure that the science is there. I really wanted it to work right across, for maths as well. You know, I didn't want it to miss out. So that's the only reason, but I do agree with you. Fundamentally, science is cultural capital, but I think it's about redressing balances, isn't it? And so it's just a sort of belt and braces, I suppose.
Thank you, Wendy. And I've got one final question. I'm going to direct this to Laura. This is from Laurie Ann. She asks, I'd love to see how this could be used in the secondary school. And I'm going to open that up to you for your thoughts. Do you think that this could be something that could be developed at secondary level?
Absolutely. I think the ownership that secondary school children could take over a museum would be so beneficial. The respect that they would have, you know, teenagers is a volatile age group. I have a stepdaughter who's 18, another who's 16, stepson who's 14. They have no interest in going to a museum because they have no understanding of a museum anymore. So if it became their museum, because we certainly found that ownership was a huge part, then suddenly they're going to be respectful, they're going to care about that building, they're going to realise that actually the buildings that surround them are theirs. Therefore, they're not going to vandalise, they're not going to want to destroy the buildings, they're going to respect it and enjoy it for what it is. I also think, back to the intergenerational thing, I think the respect that they would gain for other people, because social skills were the biggest things we saw develop. And I really think that at secondary school, to have those manners and those public social skills, I think secondary school would be amazing to go there. Yeah, definitely. They take over nicely.
Thank you, Laura. We need to move on at this point, but I just some kind of summary thoughts, really. I just, from all of our presenters and from Mel and the children right at the beginning through to Laura at the end and everybody in between, what a wonderfully rich event this has been. And some of the key words that really stand out to me from that kind of come across to me as a result of the conversations that we've had today are issues of social justice and children's voice and agency, and how that is very much bound up in their experience of relationships and community. And I think this has just been such a powerful debate and series of presentations, and I'd like to thank everybody very much for everything that you've contributed today. You've really given us very thought-provoking kind of contributions. You've supported us to think about the power of artworks, of galleries and museums, to enable all of us to give voice to the things that we value, and also the opportunities and responsibilities for art educators to facilitate those encounters with treasured works, whether those are artworks or whether they're cultural objects, as Wendy has just been explaining, in innovative and imaginative ways. And they provide an opportunity for children's voices, perceptions and experiences to be, not just to be heard, but to be honoured, to be placed central stage. So what we're now going to do is we're going to ask you to continue this conversation through breakout rooms. We've got 3 different breakout rooms, and Sophie's going to allocate you to those. And we're going to ask you to discuss this key question: how can your local galleries and museums be a space to explore what your pupils value? So our NSEAD hosts are Mel Tong, Liz McFarlane and Kate Noble. Massive thank you to you 3 for hosting the breakout rooms, and we look forward to regrouping in 15 minutes to hear a little bit about what your conversations were. So I will hand over to Sophie, who will organise you into breakout rooms.
Yes, thank you so much. And just to say, if you can't stay, we do understand that, but we do hope that this conversation, this next section of our event, will just inform some really helpful conversations that we can feed back in 15 minutes. So please do nominate one person from the group. It doesn't have to be the NSEAD person. In fact, it can't be in one of the groups. And we look forward to seeing you in 15 minutes. It will take a tiny little bit of time to get to your group, but we'll see you back in 15 minutes. We'll give you a reminder when it happens.
I've just posted the question in the chat for you, and we can put that in a breakout chat as well. Sophie, can you do you know how to post the question? It can turn up in the breakout room,
okay,
as a message.
You're going to a group, Rachel, but if you don't want to,
I'm not going to, because I need to head off.
oh yes, that's okay. Just going to pause the recording. So thank you very much for staying to the end, and it'll be an opportunity, I think, to summarize what we've been hearing, which I found completely, all 3 speakers, thank you so much for bringing very different voices, in fact, to this event. I know that we have, in fact, 2 or if hopefully 3 breakout room hosts here, but you may have nominated somebody else to share your findings. And I know that breakout room was quite a big room, and I wonder if we could start with breakout room 1 with the question: how can your local galleries and museums be a space to explore what your pupils value? So that was the question, and I wonder if it's possible to begin that conversation, or any of your suggestions. That's for breakout room 1, and who would like to take the floor, be able to? Or is breakout room 1 here?
Sorry, who was breakout room 1? I don't
remember which breakout room we were.
Oh, okay, so Laura, that was you, and Mel as well. Is Mel? Yeah. So
okay, yes, hello.
You're the bigger room.
Okay, great. Well, thank you to my breakout room. That was really lovely, and I was very pleased to see Laura again, because I was able to thank her for that. It was really fabulous presentation. Some of the things that I jotted down as I'm speaking, but please do, my breakout room, please do sort of pick me up on anything I might have missed. We talked a lot about the sort of very basics of potentials of projects, but that we picked up on some really important things that were the importance of museums and galleries reaching out at the moment to schools and educational organisations in terms of offering additional space and opportunities to visit. What were the sort of the whole revisiting side of our lives coming back into play, and making the schools, the groups feel wanted, really. I think that's a really important thing, and something that Wendy mentioned that was very pertinent to me, I wrote it in huge letters across my notes, was that safe nest space. I know that when I've been in groups, I've taken children to Turner Contemporary a lot, and we've always been given a space which the children then have the freedom to go out. I know Laura's children were younger, but our children were year 4, 5 and thereabouts, and so they're able to go out into the gallery spaces with somebody in that sort of blocking the exit, and then there is that complete freedom, but then they can retreat back to that space should they want to. We were talking about that kind of elitist vision of would they be worried to make notes or to sit and make a drawing. We had a participant called Abby who works with young adults, and she said they might feel uncomfort in that sort of given situation, that they don't feel a part of the space, yet they're sort of being asked perhaps to sit there and draw something or write something that a member of the public could see, or there's not that kind of privacy. Which is really important, I guess, for your own kind of personal freedom of expression. And that sort of comes into breaking down the barriers and making links with those organisations, so that they're not these sort of huge white spaces that we can't touch objects, we can't interact in different ways with objects. We can, first thing that every group of children I've taken to the gallery have done, if there is any type of audio exhibit, they'll pick the headphones up and put them on straight away, because that's what they know they can touch, that's what they know they can do. The very first few moments is absolutely silent as they go around, and they're sort of like, can we talk, can we, it's like being in a library at the moment. They don't know how to behave until you give them that freedom. Yeah, let's talk, let's, oh, this room makes a really strange echoey noise, and let's sort of explore that. And whilst we're learning, as Laura mentioned, about being with other members of the public, but we also ended our discussion quite abruptly with that horrid timer with a question that was maybe for other people to pick up on, which I'd like to sort of present to the wider group, which was who approaches who, really. Where does that sort of starting, that very initial conversation come from? One of our participants, Mary, asked that, would the galleries be prepared and museums be prepared to approach educational establishments to start that conversation, or is that something that is sort of relied on by the schools to do? So that's I hope I've given a sort of an essence of our conversation, my group.
And if anybody in the group has anything that Mel didn't touch on, please do say. It's a lovely small group, so we can keep this as open as possible. I mean, Mel, your students, I just really they were extraordinarily articulate. No, really, I was taking my breath away how they were able to describe and use and engage in discussion that's really high level.
Thank you.
Really, well, I'm sure that that yes, absolutely.
It is. Yeah, I mean, I think it's that kind of P4C approach as well that essentially the Turner Contemporary have taught us at our school, philosophy for children, P4C. So it's that kind of it's so much talking. When I ask for children to apply to be YALs, young art leaders, they often write on they have to sort of write an application form, because we're trying to sort of keep things real world and interesting. different. So there's never any kind of assessment of their ability. But so many of the children, when particularly in year 2 and above, 2 and 3, will say, oh, I want to be a young arts leader because my mum says I'm great at drawing, or I can draw cars really well, or, you know, and it's all about their ability. And I think so many teachers focus on that in all those other subjects often. And I think that being a young arts leader, just having a small group of children from maybe each class or each year group, can really break down those barriers, because then it becomes children leading things for other children, and they do become articulate. Thank you for that. That sort of accolade, really. They are fabulous. I think they've all left now. They've probably gone for their dinner. They've got their priorities in order. But you know, a couple of
it sort of showed now just how you may be good at drawing or able to, you know, dexterous, but all the skills that come, and we don't need to, you know, we talk to each other about this, but you know, all the skills that come from engaging in art and being able to be critical thinkers, you know, if we could just package that up, we would have been going to in the pandemic, you know, as Wendy was saying, you know, that was your hope, and it did happen in other countries.
Yes.
And I was only going to say very quickly to Mel.
Yeah, I do. Just
say,
quite open.
When I was going to try and find the projects, I definitely caught the museums first. I had the whole of Payne and Weir and Bill Griffiths, and then we settled. I looked at 5 or 6 museums, and we settled on one. And I had contact with the National Museum of Wales, and actually the head of sort of learning and community was very clear she wanted to work in Swansea, and then I found the Waterfront Museum. And Tate I already knew, but Tate we weren't able to do it in London at the time for all sorts of reasons, so we went to Liverpool. But I caught the museum first, then from there the museums or galleries and settings have lists of schools they're already working with, and so that was a starting point. So eventually that's how we found the school, but it took some doing, but I think that's quite a good way, because the audience development is what the museums are after. So I'll shut up. But that's,
yes, thank you. Thank you, Wendy.
Laurie-Anne, your next group.
Can I ask, you know how we were involved in the NSEAD with the Art Fund passes? This, to me, sounds like a fabulous way to promote those schools that aren't actually involved, to have a connection with galleries and museums. Because this kind of project would be such a wonderful opening, especially for people who don't use, you know, I'm someone who loves any excuse to get the kids out, and I think it's so important. But there are lots of people who don't. So, you know, this kind of project is such a good example to actually help people to kind of engage with that. And then having something like the Art Pass would just be a ticket, if you like. It's all very well. I often work with schools who are keen and are open to that, but it's the ones that aren't. Does that make sense? Anyway, that was my point.
No, thank you. And I know that group 3, I know that some of you have spoken already, but is there anybody from group 3? I can see that we're heading towards the end of this, and we're very happy to carry on the conversation, but Kate's group, is there anybody in that group?
We just spoke about how inspired we all were by Laura and also Mel and your students, and by Karen's talk. So we spent quite a lot of time just sort of enthusing, really. So thank you. But I don't know if anyone from my group, but Pip, I don't know whether you wanted to share some of your reflections.
What we did discuss briefly when we were thinking we better answer the question but never did, was that this business of you know, perhaps even starting in early years, because in my career, or it seemed to be the best practice happened in early years. And if we had copied that more in primary and secondary education, we'd be in a better place. And so and that remark somebody made about how would this method carry through into secondary education seems to be so important, because Laura, what you're doing is education. This is it. You're doing it through role play, through play, through exploration, and children are often leading it, which made me reflect, and you might be interested to hear this, about the mantle. Do you know about the mantle of the expert? And this is almost a parallel thing, except all that goes on in a school, but look it up. And there's a wonderful exponent school of this called the Beelings School in Norfolk. The head teacher, Duncan Bathgate, gets lots of visitors to his school. It's called the Beelings, B-E-A-L-I-N-G-S.
There's a lot of parallels, I think, between that approach and the philosophy for children approach, Mel, that Mel and Karen were talking about as well.
We were just so keen about it all, weren't we, Kate?
We were. And actually, Catherine, who's works at the National Gallery, we had some interesting thoughts as well about the role of museums and galleries to have your voice as well in this conversation. Would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think we were just kind of, as I said, it's one of those things that you could talk about for such a long period of time. It's so difficult to kind of cover it within such a short conversation. But we're just mentioning really about museums and galleries really coming to this from the point of view that they really do belong to the children, both the building, where it's situated, what's inside it, the collections. And I think really genuinely starting from that place is really where it all has to begin from.
Yeah, and also I think we more or less said, actually, Kate, you said it so well, you can say it again better, but just the idea, I was saying, Laura, that the curriculum sort of looked after itself without even thinking about it, that wasn't the focus. You're looking at everything else. And so instead of teachers being worried sick that they weren't ticking all these boxes, actually, you know, the projects happened in so many totally different places. And but the common denominator has in the background been the national curriculum, but that just happens automatically. So if the teacher sort of, I was going to say, gives up that fight and looks after, you know, having fun and co-exploring. In my head, it's the teacher being a shepherd and, you know, not being at the front of a box, which is called a classroom, and being a single point of focus, but going behind the children. Yeah. Just keeping them safe.
But it's being led by the children, isn't it? Yeah. It's that opportunity to step back and to be in a different space and a different place. And that's where the equity and value comes in, is that you're allowing the children to direct their learning. And you can cover the national curriculum, you know, as you go through, as Laura demonstrated, you know, all the, I mean, and 100 times you covered more than what you would have had on your sheet for in the reception year. We must do this in term one of year one or whatever. You know, actually you kind of covered the whole curriculum, the whole primary curriculum in 5 weeks, because it's just such rich learning that happens. And then that's the exciting thing about it, isn't it? But the challenge as well, actually, to have the confidence as teachers to step back and to be allowed as teachers to enable the children, to support the children, because teachers, we know this, we know how children learn, and the most powerful way that they learn is through discovery and exploration and through taking the lead. But it's having the head teacher or the museum or whoever it is that you're working with give you that agency yourself as an educator to be able to work in that way.
I think that one of the problems is that one is fighting, as it were, the weight of the state and the expectations of Ofsted, etc. And you need real courage to break out. And we've got we need voices like yours to do that. Yeah. It's so important that we do demonstrate to politicians, particularly, who know nothing, and they're so powerful in their ignorance, they do us all down. And we have to do something about it. And there's nothing better than being able to, Laura, demonstrate it as you have. And Wendy, you know, we've got to put it in front of their faces and say, you know, this is education.
Yeah, you're so right. Professor Donaldson came to visit our school actually. And brilliantly the head said, right, get the kids. He said, just get the kids that went to the museum. So it didn't matter who they were. I didn't go and select, again, the articulate. I just grabbed 4 kids off the yard. I said, right, quick, come up with me. And we sat in the room with him and I said, when we went to the museum, what happened? And that was it. I just sat back. And he could undeniably see all of those benefits. So you're so right that people just need to take the jump and start thinking about kids again. And education is not in the classroom with a PowerPoint of Google Images, it's real life. And that's, yeah, you're completely right.
Laura, can I just give you a little piece of advice? Whatever you do, stay in Wales. And the reason I say that is because people like Donaldson, and I don't know whether you've come across Mick Waters.
Right.
The way the Welsh are approaching education now is going to, I hope, be a leader to England, and Scotland are doing something as well, quite interesting. You know, people are thinking about it in, let's call it, a grown-up way. The English haven't got there yet because we haven't got grown-up people running our system. And we need that. So stay in Wales and do your stuff and let the Welsh show us how it's done.
We'll come to you for inspiration.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm allowed out of Wales, actually, guys. Good news.
It's so right. If I'd only remembered to switch on click the latest presentation from which I sent to Sophie earlier today, or we did. I'm sorry, Sophie, I got the previous edition, but I had the thing saying, so this project has been running in England and Wales, the Republic of Ireland, which is also moving its curriculum, Norway, so in Bergen, it's running there ever since, well, 4 or 5 years now, and the latest 2 projects are in Hamburg in Germany, where in fact with traumatized children and autistic children going into a sort of, what do we call it, like a folk museum. And there's one little boy, he's the star now of the show. He's 9 years old, his life has been horror at school. And he is now, within 2 weeks, he's their expert on pig husbandry. So he tells all the other children, he's welded to this particular part of the museum, which is about where they keep the pigs, how to look after the pigs, what they eat. He looks after the pigs. He tells all the other children about the pigs. He tells all of the other visitors coming to the museum about the pigs. And he's happy for the first time ever at school. 2 weeks it took.
I suspect
Amazing.
that message is the children probably are the best people to explain why these activities, why learning in the museum or through the museums, few museums make sense. Your pig husbandry is probably very good. He would probably change even politicians' pip. I do invite you to, we will place this presentation onto YouTube, and it will eventually go out to a wider audience than delegates and wider audience than our members. And I always wonder, how can we make sure the sort of ripple effect goes beyond us, goes beyond even our members, our extraordinary members that allow us this to happen. So, you know, I suppose that is my question, and it probably was to you, Laura. It would have been, and we don't have time for it now. That wonderful and amazing group of people, little people that went day in for 5 weeks, day out. I imagine the impact, the pollination on your school community is vast, is huge, you know. And again, these sorts of conversations can be, and I invite you to write for AD magazine. I invite, please do, because then we can put it under the noses of politicians. You know, we can use our all-party parliamentary group And perhaps I would like to suggest that we do that and have a museum focused event in Parliament, be it online as we do meet at the moment, or face to face. But I would so welcome you, please write for AD, I'm the editor, but we will make sure this gets shared far and wide so that these conversations can sort of move beyond tonight. But I could see from the chat, there has been so many things shared, so many ideas were all the presenters today. You really have been awesome. Thank you very much for doing that on top of your day jobs, which I know you are. And yes, absolutely. Kate, thank you as well for joining as well, and you know, hosting a group. Really am delighted that you've stayed until nearly 6:30, and we've been able to continue the conversation. But thank you to the presenters that are still here. It's incredible of you to stay. I feel so inspired, and I know that I'm speaking for all the people that joined earlier and people that are still here. So please go and have a lovely evening, everybody. Please write for AD. Please let us share your presentations. If you do feel that you don't want us to, please let us know as soon as possible, and we'll make sure it doesn't get shared. But let's hope we can. So thank you very much, everybody. It's been absolutely awesome. Really enjoyed this last bit of conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.